Well, good morning, everyone. Not sure whether this mic is working or just my voice is louder. It's my first time to Cluj, although it's not my first time to Romania. I've been to Bucharest probably about 5 or 6 years ago. The purpose of this trip is not only to attend this conference, but my purpose is trying to assess the local engineers and the passions in deep tech, especially in AI, where this is the space where I'm in. Can you hear me? No? Let me use the mic. All right, can you hear me now? All right, thank you. Well, so I want to take a look at the local engineers, as I haven't really had much interactions with engineers from this region. Most of my life I work with engineers in the UK, France, Germany, as well as in Japan, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and so on. So let me introduce myself a bit. My name is Danny. I'm the co-founder of Nexus and also Innovatube Frontier Labs, where we operate a team of researchers and engineers out of Tokyo and Vietnam, out of Tokyo, University, and also Vietnam. We help big corporates to build their AI capabilities, simply to turn the idle information into something that is useful for them to improve their operation efficiency, especially in the finance industry. I also serve as an entrepreneurship expert at a site business school. That's basically, I teach a little bit, I help the startups in University of Oxford, trying to bridge the gap between the technical and business founders. I'm also a fellow at the Cody Pons Business School. This is basically a domain where I research much about how to use technology to influence the economy. I'm an angel investor where I have a small fund to invest in early stage company. That's because I can help them with product development. I'm also a mentor at Microsoft Syracuse, Bootcamp IoT, LBS Launchpad, HEC Paris, and so on. I speak at various conferences like this, TEDx, and I also serve as a lecturer at various institutions, mostly with executive education, and I write articles together with my partners on various domains. The clicker is not moving. Remove the first slide. Right, so there we go. Anyway, so AI and IoT. Well, as you know, so-called frontier tech or deep tech, especially in the last 2 years, that's how people call it. There are 4 main focus. Of course, not only restricted to these 4. They are basically AI, IoT, blockchain, and AR/VR. And to me, all 4 technologies are fascinating, especially blockchain. But what we can do right now, the application where it can be applied and has already been applied right now on the real businesses are mainly AI and IoT. Not to mention IoT is simply, it has always been here, it has never been give birth or born from any creators. But AI, especially in the last few years, since the birth of deep learning, has given a lot of possibilities to the IoT devices. For example, the smartphone, for example, the sensors, smart home, autonomous driving, so on and so forth. You can see the trend. This is the trend that I captured from a few aggregator web sites, especially CV Insights. The venture capital funding in AI-focused IoT startups has risen from drastically, to about 700 million in the first half of 2017 only, and this year is definitely increasing, though I don't have the data yet. The acquisition of IoT startups that utilize AI has increased from 11 to 21 in the first 8 months of 2017. IoT vendors, platforms like Microsoft, Amazon, GE, IBM, Oracle are all expanding their AI capabilities. And the Gartner predicts that by 2022, more than 80% of IoT devices will have to include AI. And most importantly is there are already a lot of companies, not only companies, even SMEs are already adopting AI in their application usage. Can you help me to move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So, how is it working? It's simply, why is the convergence of this technology makes it good? It's simply, the hardware devices is getting smarter with the help of AI. It's simply moving it in a much better way. The combination of sensors and machine learning and deep learning is basically helping us to move on to intelligent IoT. Sorry for the slides, but and move on to intelligent automation. I'll explain a little bit about intelligent automation later. But it's basically, it allows, not only allows the devices to detect and continuously collecting the data, but it also generates fast and precise predictions and insights. And these two, fast and precise, are the key factors in how the businesses can make a difference. It's no use if you generate an insight 5 days later where everything else is already being got the insight from. Human can do, let's say, human can do the job that AI can do nowadays. It's not something that human can't do, but the problem is, can human do it in the shorter time and more accurate? And that is the key of how machines can help us, can automate the processes, the operations, in a better way than humans, simply because they can do it faster and they can do it with less error, higher accuracy. That's how it's going to make a difference in the industry. And intelligent automation is a new term that was born just about a year or two ago. It's simply an upgrade of RPA, robotic process automation. It's simply, I'm sure you all know that RPA is simply to use a few programs to automate a few processes, but it still requires human to intervene in every single steps of it. Whereas intelligent automation largely relate to data. It's trying to automate the whole process without much human intervention, because as long as you have human to intervene, the accuracy rate is going to be reduced, simply because human can never operate the same efficiency rate all the time. Human has emotional changes, human has external internal factors affecting them. Hence, human cannot operate at the same efficiency level that a human can operate all the time, whereas a machine has less factors to affect them. Hence, they can operate in a much more stable state. And if you aggregate the whole process journey, the outcome is always better than human, and that's why machines, production or machine running is better than human, and that's just the key. Can you help me to move to the next slide? So, what's the outcome of these, the combination of convergence of sensors and AI? There are 4 main areas. First is to avoid unplanned costly downtime, using predictive maintenance. For example, the technology of DeepMind, the deep learning model of DeepMind, what do you think of DeepMind? Are they just creating the DeepMind AlphaGo for the sake of the game, the chess? No, it is not. They are predicting for trying to predict the next possible ways to actually make it more efficient. And that's how the DeepMind Go chess beat the human beings in predicting battles. Although human can always imagine the steps of how it moves, but it cannot move it faster than the machine. Simply, that's the reason why it works much better, especially in a real production time. I'm going to go in a bit deeper in this Google case in the next slide. Second, it's basically increasing operational efficiency, especially the redundant tasks. And this is what we humans don't like to do. It's not only about the blue-collar job that, repeating doing the same thing in the production line, but also, even if you are a developer, you also try to automate the codes that you're trying to do, a lot of so-called smart coding. You just don't want to repeat the same thing. A lot of you, many people are using copying some codes and so on. You just don't like to do the things that has already been done. Why should I be spending more time on those things? Humans should be spending more time on creating, on imagining how to make it better, rather than wasting our times on creating, on copying, on rewriting the same code again. So operational efficiency is one of the key parts, and that's the key part for intelligent automation to actually move our production in a much better way. There is a production line. I'm sure you know there's a large manufacturing company that is specialized in helping Apple to produce the iPhone in China, where they used to employ more than 300,000 factory workers to run the production of the machines. And in the last 5 years, they have been replacing human laborers with a lot of robotic hands, and also with a lot of AI in trying to produce it, simply because it runs in a much faster way. The robotic hand simply only replace a very basic task, but with AI, they're able to replace some of the more higher redundancy tasks. And I can tell you more, one of the interesting cases that we help with is not only, AI is definitely not only replacing low-level skills. It's aiming to replace some of the high professional tasks as well. Let me give you an example. Lawyer. We have a legal company in Tokyo to create a spin-out of the company. The legal company has about 30 legal staffs. And the way how a lawyer operates is simply to charge their consulting hours, how much per hour. And hence, by 30 staff multiplied by the number of available hours, you can calculate the maximum possible operating revenue that the company can have. Although it will never be 100% efficiency uptime. But that creates a limitation on the valuation of the company or the potential revenue of the company. So this type of consulting job, the problem is it's a high recurring cost. You need to, the number of revenue, it heavily depends on the number of consultants you have. So what we did was simply to try to look into the redundancy task of what the consultant does or what the lawyer does every day. So for example, in some of the SME, sales and purchase agreement, NDA, non-disclosure agreement, some of the easy contract dealing, what do the lawyer do every day? What they do is simply to just change the name and change some small terms in the contract. They have the template. They have all the possible templates that they can think of already. What they do is simply to replace some of the things, and they need to spend a lot of time understanding the context again, and explain to the client. And that's what it costs the time and the money. So what we did is simply we created a terminology detection AI platform for them, where they can easily create a new contract based on a new criteria input, and then create an output with the summary for the legal consultants, hence reducing their operating hours of, let's say, 3 operating hours for a legal contract to about 30 minutes. And that virtually increased their valuation of the company or possible revenue of the company by at least 5x, considering taking all the factors, downtime factors into considerations. The third, enable new and improved products and services. So when you think about all these new devices, the new way of doing things, you are simply not looking into trying to improve each of the processes. You are basically creating a new possible way of doing things already. So say for example, autonomous driving, we don't need driver anymore. So we don't need to actually train the driver, or we actually can reduce the insurance premium because the possible risk is much less. Hence, we'll focus more on other possible risks, new risks that could create by autonomous driving, because the risk, you cannot hedge the risk to human factors, human driver anymore. The risk is now being embedded in the whole company's reputation because this is standardized. So essentially, you are creating new opportunities, new risks with new processes. Drone, autonomous driving, I mean, drone delivery. What's the new opportunity is very obvious, but what's the new risk? Is if something is stolen when you drop a goods in front of a house, if something is stolen, where to claim, how to claim. Before that, you have human delivery, you can claim the company, or damages, and all these things. So it creates a new opportunity and also a new risk, a total new process to look at the operation. The risk management, I touched a bit just now, but a lot of the AI capabilities nowadays is still not totally automated. It simply has to be prefigured and matching with existing database to create the objective. So if I were to put it this way, AI is simply a tool of probability. Either you predict how high is the probability of going this way, then you choose the option, or a tool to detect defects. So with the possibilities of the whole machine learning, you simply create a new way of hedging risks, creating a new state of mind for the stakeholders, because you are now, let's say in ATM fraud, if a theft knows that he can't actually break into an ATM machine anymore because it's not only about the surveillance camera that taking it, but it will detect and it will alert the authority immediately when something is happening. Hence, it will basically reduce the risk. Simply, they won't want to do this stupid action anymore. Can you please? Yeah. So, of course, it's not limited to these 6 industries, but today I'm just trying to explain a little bit about, autonomous driving in this healthcare, retail, especially retail. That's where I would like to touch on mostly, simply because it uses most of the hardware devices, manufacturing, smart home, and e-commerce. Yeah. So this is a Google case, the DeepMind case. About the AlphaGo, when you read the news about AlphaGo beating human in Go chess, did it mean anything to you? When the readers read the news, did it mean anything to you? Most of the readers don't feel anything. It's simply, okay, well, it's scary. Machine beats human beings. Is it going to replace us? But that's not the objective. The objective of AI, AI is still not the human beings that can't think. The objective of the DeepMind beating chess is no use, because why would you want to solve the chess problem? The objective of a game, chess, is not to solve the problem. it is to have fun. You need to enjoy the process of finding the solutions for the chess. It's not about knowing the solutions already. That defeats the creator of the game. This is where it can be put into actual application. So Google used the deep learning methodologies to actually apply onto its data center to reduce the energy consumption by 40%. And that is an amount of at least $5 million a year of saving. Google bought DeepMind for about $400 million about 5 years ago. And that's the return immediately. And actually it's extending to more possibilities. The best one is basically for those end users of Google Cloud. You're going to optimize your cloud usage in a much better way because it's now being handled in a more efficient way. Hence, you can handle more data in a lower cost. It's just as simple as that. And that is a practical usage. And that is very, very important for developers, for creators to think about how to actually make use of the technology, not to think too much about the future because solutions will always come along. What we need to do is to look at the current problem and solve the current problem because there are already enough problems for us to solve, for us to make use of the technology to solve, rather than look into the problems of tomorrow, because tomorrow there will be another new problem. Well, autonomous driving, you all know, all this testing are already been done in mainly in the US, China, and also a bit in the UK as well. But does it mean anything? The purpose is definitely not to put out an automated driving immediately. I mean, you read all the news from Tesla, it's still crashing, it's still killing people. Right? I mean, how Uber driving has just killed somebody. There are at least 3 or 4 people that has been killed by all this automated driving already. The company is still going on. Is it just trying to create an automated car for you? No. It's trying to apply, it's already being applied onto applications like in farming. Do you need to drive the truck to just keep on seeding and harvesting? No, you don't want to do that job. It's worse than actually you have an objective of driving a car to a destination that you want to go, and you can hedge all the possible risks within your journey, compared to in a farming situation, there's basically very little factors that will affect your farming, except for some weather conditions or so on. You basically already know all the factors beforehand, or majority percentage of the factors. So you just do all this, for example, truck, autonomous driving on the freeway. It's also within use of the case as well. Healthcare. Healthcare is still relatively slightly less influenced. There are a lot of talks in the healthcare industry, but there's still very little actions or real applications. But there are some hospitals, some test cases being applied into a few hospitals, especially by affiliates, Gs, and so on, with partnerships. What they do is they're not really thinking about trying to find out, checking the diagnosis of the, problems or all these things, because it's just not accurate enough, especially on the interpretation. What they do is simply, in a so-called smart hospital, is just trying to replace some of the tasks that is not supposed to be handled by the nurses and the doctors. Imagine in hospitals, what type of personnel do you have? Majority of the personnel in the hospitals are doctors and nurses. Admin, cleaning staff are just a small percentage of it. But what do they do most of the time in the hospitals when they answer to the patient's issues? more than 70% of the issues they solve are non-medical issues. For example, a patient wants to sit up. For example, a patient wants to reach out to a TV remote control to turn on the TV. For example, the patient wants to make a call. All these is non-medical related problem. And this is where the problem comes in. How to make the nursing staff and the doctors really make use of their expertise, rather than spending all these things on non-medical related, non-profession related tasks, is basically to create some autonomous detection and also people detection of what do they want to do, or trying to create an automated device for them to control the things surrounding them, to detect any problems rather than waiting for them to call for help. These are very simple applications, but it is creating a huge impact if you really put it into a dollar term. Yeah. Smart home. I have helped quite a lot of IoT companies in the last couple of years, especially those companies that are trying to get onto Kickstarters. So I help Kickstarter to filter some of the fake products, put it that way. A lot of so-called smart devices, smart plugs, although some of them are big brands, Philips, and so on. Do they actually solve our problem? No, because if you think from the implementation point of view, it's expensive. It's difficult to replace, it's difficult to implement, and the most important thing is it's upgrading every year. And would you upgrade your TV every year? No, you would not. So why should you be looking into the end devices, the edge devices for replacing things? That's why the IoT B2C industry did not kick off in the last 2 years. It's simply non-economical enough. It was a trend, it was a quick trend, but it wasn't able to kick off. So this is a simply a small experiment by a lot of people, including myself. Rather than focusing on replacing the end devices with smart or sensors, we simply put a server, a local server, to connect to existing connectivity. What is the existing connectivity of your home devices, TV, air conditionings, and so on? It's infrared, radio frequency, RF, and a device that can receive IR and RF instructions and connect it onto the internet with an application. That solves the problem. We can even run around to connect with Alexa to control the whole thing without changing a single thing. The whole project costs less than £100 compared to replacing a smart TV or a smart fridge. That will already cost you thousands of dollars. A smart plug costs you £30–40. So, so this is just a simple solution. Retail. Amazon Go, as you know, is testing on various locations. I had a chance to visit one store in Seattle. It's still very limited, and also it's a testing. Many people are trying to actually test how secure it is, and it's proven that it's not 100% secure. You can steal things without knowing in a very, very easy way. But it's serving as a pilot plant. In China, there are a lot of already implemented humanless stores. That's rather than using a computer vision, machine learning, they try to use the RFID to allow the consumers to scan for the checkout. So, right. So, how do we increase the efficiency with AI? Simply, important thing for us to do when we look into the existing problem is our existing way of doing things. There are many defects. There are many ways that we can improve on our daily actions. And for example, in a computer or in a daily reports, all these PDF, all these news site, is it something smart? No. You need to read it, you need to understand it, you need to extract it, and you need to summarize it. You need to then run the big data analysis with all this data. This process of reading, understanding costs a lot of time. The data that you captured from all these CCTVs, is it currently used by people? No. You need to put people to look at the CCTV, to scan, to detect. Is there somebody stealing things? Is there somebody trying to do something wrong? It's actually using human power to do all these things. And what AI can do is definitely try to improve these processes by reducing human involvement. Images and videos. So say for example, we focus in finance industry, and the reason why we focus in finance industry is simply because the ROI is much obvious. The finance industry is much more willing to invest in any new application, and that helps them to improve because the result is very apparent. So imagine in M&A, merger and acquisition activities, that usually easily takes 6 to 9 months for any M&A case. What do they do? What do the consultant do? It's simply to read a lot of reports every day and extract it into data, all this idle information to extract into data. Then only they can do their analysis on Excel, on the program, SPSS, and so on. What AI can do is simply to, like the legal case, simply to scan with 100% efficiency and then extract it and summarize for the human to do the analysis. Because what models is using for each application, that depends on humans to think, to create. But we don't need the human to just basically go through all the data, reading all the data. One of our client, our bank client, in their M&A department, they basically have 30 staff every day just reading the ratings report. That's what they do. And it's boring. Those people in the departments are usually junior, very junior, first time school leavers. And they're trying to Goldman Sachs, I can help. And it's just reading and then trying to extract information for the senior to do the analysis. The senior will definitely not going to read all these articles and so on. No. So what is the best way to use AI in IoT? I come up with 3 conclusions. One is miniaturization. It has to be lighter and faster. The IoT device, the hardware device, it has to be low energy consumption and affordable and implementable. For example, one of the models that we created, this is on the hardware, this is on the camera. So you've seen the Amazon camera, the Amazon AI camera that costs $250, that you can run machine learning models on the camera itself. But it's expensive, it's difficult to implement. That is for a testing device. You can play around with it, but is it really useful? No. You can't actually force a company to change all their CCTV cameras because it's a huge cost. It's going to disrupt their daily operations. It's difficult to upgrade because you know the hardware is going to upgrade easily anytime. So what we do, it was a process as well. In the early stage, we also created our own AI camera, but with Raspberry Pi, hence it costs very cheap. And instead of running, running 300 microservos of the model size, we just run very specific that the camera needs to analyze. So say, for example, with a specific objective, theft detection, falling detections, so on and so forth. Accuracy. The AI models nowadays is not only about data. There's a big discrepancy between an AI researchers, a real AI researchers, and an AI engineers. And AI, in the AI researchers world today, is definitely not about data anymore. Because data has been overflowed. We don't need so much data. And as a matter of fact, there are a lot of things, a lot of industries that doesn't have data at all. I'll give you one more example. We once helped a furniture shop in Japan, one of the largest furniture shops in Japan. And they tried to do a predictive analysis of what would consumer preference would like to buy. But they don't have historical data. Simply, how many furnitures do you buy how, in your lifetime? Sofas? 1 or 2 sets of sofa maximum? There's no historical data. Even IKEA is difficult to produce a historical data for a specific client. So, instead of using historical data, we use preference data. We try to only collect the data that we need to do, that we need to use to create the models to predict what's the next step. So, say for example, I can give you a scenario. A 30-year-old man just got married a year ago, and is trying to move into a new home, and is planning to have a kids within 1 or 2 years' time with general assumption, and it's predicted that he might have a career change or next stage of their career, hence the demand of him is definitely not influenced by his historical preferences. Hence this is what we need to predict by taking very accurate types of data. Customizations, and this is the important part where I assume all of you are developers or engineers, or most of you. And I'm sure you must have faced a problem when you work with a non-technical client, where you're trying to explain to them what you can do, and they're trying to explain to you what they want. And simply you're wasting a lot of time by just talking to each other. It's simply the frequency is different. You would never make them understand, then they will never make you understand. So the product development process is never smooth. Basically, I would assume most of you, especially the product manager, would spend majority of your timeline and your time on actually communicating. The actual amount of time that spending on the actual code writing is very minimal. So it is important at this stage or in any stage is actually on the provider side, the technical expert needs to work with the industry expert or the domain expert together to build a solution towards a specific industry. I'll go into that in a lot more detail later. So this is the graph of convergence between the IoT and AI. You will see that this is definitely not a linear curve, simply because the amount of data collected or the amount of data available in the early stage of the development of each application is basically not too useful. It's only going to be until a certain stage that you're going to make use of it. You're going to be able to interpret, analyze it. Well, this is what I meant by the partnership between the technical experts and industry experts. Problem identification, data collection, model building, and deployment. It may seem very simple, but this is $1 million questions that all of us are trying to solve. So it's a bit of a product showcase. What we created is, instead of keep continuing trying to improve the accuracy of the AI, what we do is NLP, and we achieve maximum 99.6% of accuracy in the text recognition. And instead of spending the time to improve to 99.9%, it would never be 100%, simply because of the external factor, is we created a platform that allows in the enterprise or anybody to actually manage, add, remove, any AI applications, any AI models in a hybrid way. So we store the data on premise and we put the applications on the cloud to create a safety buffer. So essentially, it's actually a Docker for AI. That's what we are creating. Trying to make the process of product development and product management in a much better way. So we're just trying to make it easy for organizations to implement and deploy any new technology, especially in AI, to run it better, leaner, and smoother. And that is how we're trying to make these two work together in a much easier way. It's basically an architecture that we try to combine the online and offline between input and output. This is a Docker graph, basically, to try to play around with the different elements of the models and the applications to make it easier to implement. I'm not saying that it's 100% efficiency, and this is going to be half open source. So we're going to release the APIs soon, predictively by the end of this year, where we're going to hold a big conference in London and San Francisco. So that is basically what we are building at the moment. Well, that's basically what we're trying to solve the problem, security. We're trying to make it not putting the data on the cloud. It's simply anything that is on the cloud, it's not safe. No matter how secure it is, there's definitely a way to hack if you have it opened. So we're trying to control the data on the premise to reduce the risk, and we are trying to, basically it's a version control architecture. It's trying to control the versions in different way. Users need to download the programs that you need to run, or the application, specific part of the application that you need to run at that time onto the server to connect with the data, and sometimes to upload some of the data that is needed by the cloud by encrypting the data. Allows flexible scaling up, down. It's flexible, allows additions, any additions or deleting when the business process changes. So to put it into perspective, let's put it that way: documents reader, text recognition, sensor data, camera data, all run through the platform with the server storage on premise, and then the models on the cloud, the AI models on the cloud, such as TensorFlows and so on, and then pushing the output to the edge devices, for example, drones, for example, smartphones, robotics, autonomous cars, and so on. And the implications, the applications of these is basically very wide. We are now focusing mostly in banking and finance, especially M&A, merger and acquisitions, especially compliance, GDPR, fraud detections, private equity industry as well, legal, contract management, in manufacturing, cost reductions, operation optimizations, robotic enhancement, in retail, fraud detection, stakeholders management, and logistics arrangement. And the type of data that we can collect and stream through to achieve these objectives. Graphic images from CCTV, reports, emails, contracts, machine data, the sensors from the machine, from the hardware, operation data, the existing process key indicator, CRM, information security, social media's data, trying to go through this to achieve the intelligence automation. So this is our latest models, that instead of building the AI models on the devices itself, and it requires upgrade every year, instead of that, we basically put an AI box on the premise. So say in retail's examples, we try to do the theft detections for a large company, Uniqlo, and they had a pilot store in Tokyo where they tried to run the analysis of consumer behavior, tagging with the customer's membership card where they already log in with their personal details, and you can match the data the moment you step into the door. But instead of what we tried to do was simply trying to run the machine learning models on the camera so that it is fast enough to create an action. Because if you send the data back to the cloud, large amount of graphic sending over the cloud will just slow down the deployment of the action. It's just too slow. It's not effective at all. So people are trying to run the model on the camera itself, but it's not sustainable. So we move from the camera solutions to on-premise server solutions. Basically, we created, it can be on actually any computers, let's say. You build the models on the computer itself. The images that pass through the premise to the computers will run through the models quickly enough to create the actions. Hence, you don't need to touch anything on the camera sides. You just need to continuously upgrade your models on the server. Again, speed and accuracy is key in actually creating an action that is better than humans. That is the key in deploying any technology. So I'm going to give you an example more on the cameras that we created. I'm going to showcase you more on. The key thing is behavioral analysis rather than identifying what action. So, video tagging, object detection, face recognition, customized model. But everything else is not important if we don't have behavioral analysis. Creating action is key rather than just understanding it. The type of sensors rather than just images is combination of different sensors, RGB, RF, IR, DEF, and then go through the platform to create enough actions. This gives you a lot of imaginations. For example, a theft detection or fire detection. Instead of allowing humans to create the response, a drone can solve the problem in a much faster way. A crisis, instead of calling 999 or 911, a drone may create a much better response than human beings. So I'm going to showcase you a few use cases. Escalator falling, ATM fraud, flight detection. Falling and flight detection technologies basically helps the client to create a lot more possibilities. So say, for example, can you actually play? This is a video of a detection. I'm sure you've seen this type of image recognition training models before. I can't really show you the responses of the speed, but this is something that I'm sure you have seen before. Normal behavior, and then detection of abnormality, hence creating the response, but the speed and accuracy is the key that I can't show it here. So see, fighting scene starting with the alert of the red sections. Falling detection, can you play as well? Yeah. So you can see what we are trying to do is we are trying to tag with different behavior when it's walking or when it's predictive analysis of it's about to fall, simply because the area where they are walking to that has been detected as a slippery area. So use cases too, public transport interchange, transport supply and demand, camera with people counting technology can send real-time notifications to a range. For example, in a shopping mall or airports, you can basically solve a lot of problems by sending, let's say, increasing the number of taxis or increasing the number of frequencies for the public transports. You can scan any abnormality behaviors. This is a heat map recognition. This is more of a detailed analysis of what a mall management can do. They can adjust their rental fee based on the popularity in that specific area. Hence, they can increase their income. The competency of different spots can be adjusted based on the demand. Resource allocation can be arranged, more staff, less staff. Actually, in one of the malls that we were working with, also use it to charge the advertisement board in a different pricing depending on the data collected as well. And this is basically giving them, let's say, your online social media advertisements way of managing on an offline situation, hence creating a lot of possibilities for the advertising company. So basically, my conclusion for the AI and IoT, especially in IoT, is simply at the moment, hardware is upgradable and is upgrading every year. Although there's still a lot of problems, for example, the battery life, expensive, high replacement costs, and so on, but it is able to be solved with different way of looking around it. Instead of touching the one that is highly volatile, upgradable device, you can look into another way of solution. Of course, there are some technologies that we have been working with, a few sensors that basically uses kinetic energy to arrange the energy battery storage instead of using a real battery, hence creating an unlimited energy supply for that small devices. So that's all for my presentation. I try not to go into a lot more into AI model creation because this is definitely not the area where AI engineers should be focusing in, because increasing accuracy from 99.2% to 99.6% makes no much difference to the final client. What the final client wants is 100%, and that is what everybody wants. How to create the 100% effectiveness for the client is simply a way to work around it, whether by creating a hedge devices or by replacing humans to correct the error from that part. And I also wanted to stress in the understanding of the problem before you actually create the solution is key, because only this way that you can create a sustainable way of product development to allow the clients to basically, let's say, satisfy and come back to you. Thank you. Yeah. Any questions? If I can hear you, you can speak, yeah.
Hello. DeepMind and is it on? Hey. All right. So DeepMind and other things that you mentioned here are narrow artificial intelligence. They concentrate on solving a specific problem. Mm-hmm. Would it make sense to develop or to consider developing general artificial intelligence, which can actually probably solve all of these problems better?
Right.
Are you working on that? Or?
Well, it seems like there's no exceptions. In every conference that I speak, my first question is definitely general intelligence. Well,
The question is, can we actually create a general intelligence? At the moment, none of the researchers have any idea of how to create general intelligence. That's a problem. We can imagine, but we don't know the steps to begin. To us, general intelligence does not come from our AI labs at the moment. General intelligence comes from biotech. Remember, about 20 years ago, the creation of the clone sheep, Dolly, in the UK.
Yeah.
That was scary to us. Do we know what have we created? Is it another being, another soul? Is it the same thought? That is general intelligence because, I mean, the AI today, let's say even, you look at the Boston Robotics, the horses and the dogs, what it does is simply to open the door or to jump. I mean, that is basically a 6-month-old baby can do. But in biotech or in the field of genetics, we simply don't know what have we created. So I hope that answers your questions partially because there are many controversials about, whether should we actually find the final possible ways rather than going through all these possible steps of solving things. My answer is yes and no. Yes, we hope that it will be much more, we dream of 100% efficiency, but we simply don't know how to begin the first step. Number two is, should we do that? That is a big question.
That was my next question, because there are basically two major camps, some that hope this general artificial intelligence will solve a lot of problems, and others that fear it.
Right.
Which camp are you in?
I don't have a slide here, but at the moment, NLP using deep learning is still very limited. I would say the best text recognition in the world is still Google Translate today, up to today. But does Google translate your context? No, it only translates your words. And that is the state where NLP can up to today. It does not understand the context of the whole sentences. It only understands the specific word of it. And before we can solve these issues, unfortunately, we just have to go through a single steps of automation. We do believe in about 10 years of time, that's what we think, we will be able to solve the general NLP issues to understand the context. Now, when that happens, the biggest implication is not the destroy of human beings, but the replacement of jobs. Basically, like secretary, general e-commerce and all these things, you basically, customer service, you don't need human anymore. You basically, machines, a chatbot can understand exactly what you ask and create an emotional response to fit your need. But that is basically not able to do at the moment. That's why we still have to go through if this, then that at this stage.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. You talked about the AIX, the platform you...
Yeah.
So this is, I understand this is a platform you developed at Nexus.
Yes.
Yeah. And now moving away from AIX, so me as myself as a developer,
yeah.
I don't know the details of how databases work. So I just take a database, I create the model. So the database gives me the possibility to
right.
my own models. I put the models in, and then I use the database.
Yeah,
Is it something similar? So I create my own models, and then I use it in a similar fashion that I would use a database, or some.
Not to directly answer your question, I had an interesting discussion with Peter, the next speaker, yesterday about all these models that created by engineers. It's just unimaginable, crazy models, correlations. Simply, again, to put it into practical use, the data that we have today, or the available data that we have today, simply cannot derive to a specific, useful conclusion. It cannot. I understand where you come from. You're trying to use a massive data to try to find out the correlations to specific objective. It's very difficult, and it's using a lot of energy, not only human, but computer energy to actually find out the big data analysis, to find out what you can get from the data set, the large sample of data set. This is problem number one. Problem number two is where to find the data. It's easy. We all say that, yeah, we need data to run machine learning models, but almost every AI startup that I coach have the problem of trying to get their clients to give them data simply because the clients don't even know where their data is, or they don't have the time to collect and aggregate the data. So it is nice to think this way, but in practical terms, it is not applicable. It's not practical. And that's where the bottleneck of today's engineers' machine learning models. And to me, that is the differences between a real AI researchers and an AI engineers of simply replicating the models, the creation of the models. I mean, a new model is not just about plugging in data and try to fit on the objective. No, a new model is a totally different set of objective that fits to that. Then only look for the data that requires to fit into it. That is non-biased, because if you use the existing data set, you are basically falling into the trap of the previous data bias already. Can you understand what I mean? Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, kind of, yes.
So this platform, how far is it from being used without actually having deep knowledge of AI? Because very few people have deep knowledge of AI.
Exactly,
so
okay.
More are generalists, like,
yeah.
I have a great general idea.
Because myself and my partners, we coach a lot of AI startups. And we know the pain point of AI startups is everybody can raise money, but the actual sales of the company products is very minimal, very, very minimal. If you know Logix, an Israeli startup that is raising a lot of money in New York, in total they raised about $40 million just about 2 days ago. They raised another $20 million 2 days ago. But the actual sales is very, very limited. They make less than 1 mil ARR in the last 2 years. The problem is simply you cannot easily implement an AI models into an application. And the second problem is simply AI companies also, they heard about all these fascinating news about AI, but they also don't know who to look for. And that's the purpose of AIX, that we're trying to connect the both. So if you are the end user, then we already have the options available, all the different AIs, text, graphics, voice, recognition models, or specific objective like Logix to solve the legal issues, to embed into the AIX platform and allows it to deploy to the client. Because every AI company at this moment, when they need to deploy or when they need to sell a service to a client, although they say they are AI as a service, but everybody needs a setup cost. And the setup cost is easily minimum $30,000 to $50,000 US one time. And then only they charge the recurring fees. That is everybody. There's no exception at all, because simply they cannot afford to put their AI scientists to create the models for that specific purpose every time. That requires a high setup cost, first-time setup cost, and then the recurring fees. So what we're trying to do is to solve the problems of startups trying to sell their products and the enterprise to deploy the startup solutions into them. That's a very big vision, although at the moment it's still an internal research project. So the objective is simply because we have done so many customization projects for the client, working with different startups as well. So we know we can create the architecture, but it's not a full scale yet. That's why we need to put it out half open source to to gather more inputs into the system.
Which half is open source?
That I cannot reveal yet. Mostly we're going to open up the input side, most likely. And that, the reason why I cannot reveal is simply we haven't decided yet as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From what I understand, practically your goal with AIX platform is efficiency on cost, and you said security. And regarding the second model of security, I wanted to ask if you can elaborate on that. For example, the most exotic idea when someone thinks of AI is startups that try to predict the stock market. And why would a startup like this, who probably has finances of millions of dollars, would choose your platform for using their learning models, for using their data, instead of going to Amazon or something like that? Is your platform going faster? Is your platform having more expertise, more data efficiency?
Yeah. First of all, a stock market predictive platform is not an AI platform. It's just a big data analysis platform. The model is pre-created model is fixed model. Hence, it just flows through the model. You can't really change the model every day. Otherwise, the prediction is not accurate anymore. That is number one. And secondly, I do agree that they don't need AIX because it's already a predictive model. So that is a specific use case of the output is simply an informational. There's no, unless the company wants to put an automatic bidding into the stock market, then they would need to use AIX. Otherwise, if it's just an informational output for human to actually buy and sell, trade on the stocks, then they don't need this platform.
I see. And another question is not AX related. You mentioned before, when you talked about healthcare, you said that most models that will be implemented in healthcare will replace normal routines made by normal people, but not necessarily with medical concern. What's in your opinion, what's your take on startups that use TensorFlow, for example, to detect using very large data collection of images to detect cancer or other skin issues? Do you think that we'll get to a model when doctors will be replaced, or will simply just efficiency a doctor, an oncologist?
I believe it would be useful, but it will not be implemented that soon. Simply, doctors are regulated. In order to pass through the FAA approvals of, you are like creating a new way of diagnosis, which means you have to go through the authorities' approval, and a drug to approve by FAA in the US is average 7 to 10 years, which means even if you can create an output, the doctor can't put it into mass scale. That is the situation of the business problem, not the technical problem. I do agree that using the big samples, you can definitely recognize a lot about, what diagnosis and, cancer diagnosis and all these things. However, there is also risk. The risk is simply if the model is not created based on unbiased model, the result is easily changed, easily. So I've seen different models trying to reach to a certain objective, trying to detect the same thing. And these two models are simply very, very small variances. And the result is totally different once they switch it a little bit. So which means the risk of the model giving a biased output is very, very likely. And as technical researchers, we can try all this model without any problem. We can also do a pilot test with a doctor or two without any problem. But to apply it onto the mass scale is a big problem, because until we can solve all these possibilities issues, all the risk issues, we're not able to put it onto the large scale. First thing is we need to pass through the authority stage. That is the problem in the healthcare. You need to ensure 100% effectiveness. You can't have any risk or error. It's worse than autonomous driving. Yeah.
Hi. You said one of your focus fields was retail with this platform, correct?
Mm-hmm.
In the light of Facebook's recent security issues,
Right.
would you expect any government regulations on this platform, or how do you think the general population would react to the fact that they're being tracked, their behavior is being tracked in the mall? And because at least, take for example, Eastern Europe is pretty non-responsive to this idea of being tracked all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the human side, so to speak?
Right.
To this
So
whole thing?
That's why the business side comes in. One of the slides, I can't change it back anymore, but I can now. Anyway, one of the slides shows that, number one, basically, we don't collect the data on the cloud. We basically aggregate the data on premise, and that is the security issues. But that's not answering your question. The answering your question is the data collection itself. The data collection itself, of course, you know, the Facebook models is, I have all these thousands of agreement that you have to agree before using my platform, and nobody reads it, so I assume you accept it. And then, hence, I collect your data. This is one way of putting in, actually an evil way of putting in. Another way of putting in is, we're trying to help you to be more secure by letting the people, good and bad people, knows that we are watching you. It's like putting a police force onto the society. And we basically, it's a policing tool to warn, to pre-warn any bad behaviors from being happened, and also to create a faster responses if any accident is happening. And this is a different context of how we describe it, although the action is similar, but that's all about how you put it and the regulations, right? The regulators, I haven't gone into that stage yet. The number of data, in the technical term, because it's stored on-premise only, there are a lot of parameters can be set. For example, you know, encrypted, destroying, because you no longer need it. This is the common problems, even with Facebook can do it as well. The only thing is how you actually interpret from each side.
Well, as a developer, I understand your goal,
Mm-hmm.
and I support it.
Yeah.
I was just thinking from the general population's view.
It's limited use. It has to be limited use. So say, for example, of course, a lot of general public will have to be informed. It's only taken in general public area. It's only, and we have to explain to them, for example, in London, there are more than 3,000 surveillance cameras on the street, taking all the footages of us, but they are not being used. They are just being displayed in a video format, somebody watching it 24/7 of what is happening, but they are not being interpreted. That is existing. So what we're trying to do is, we're still doing the same thing. In all the retail mall, there are surveillance camera. We're not changing anything. We're not adding more cameras or anything. We're just trying to interpret it and then create better responses or to pre-warn for public. So it has to be transparent, the action. And of course, it has to be, it will take some time for general public to actually understand that this is the same behavior, this is the same thing that we are already doing. But now the objective is, this is falling into the sector of PR, is we're trying to make you safer, we're trying to warn the bad guys off. We're trying to make you safer by if something happens, we'll create. It's a PR issues. Again, you know, it's it's a convergence between business and technical people, but there are many ways of putting into it as well. And the way how I look at Facebook case, and also a lot of other, let's say, GDPR case, is simply, at the moment, companies, especially internet companies and developers, are taking way too much data that they cannot use and don't need to use. It's just way too much data, and those data are actually creating too many biases. That is our views. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Alex. Thank you for your presentation.
Sorry.
Here.
Can I? Okay.
Okay. Regarding this slide, you have here the customized model. You know, one problem for the old software, or maybe a source of benefits, you have to change it. For example, I have an accounting application. Tomorrow the law is changing. I have to change that application. And for this model, if I already made one, for example, fight detection. I made a model to fight detection with a stick.
Yeah.
But tomorrow the request is to detect with a gun.
Yeah.
The day after tomorrow is with the gun and the stick, and so on.
Yeah.
How flexible is your platform, or how do you manage to?
That is the purpose of AIX. It allows us to add new parameters, or just, let's say, just replace the model or add new models. That is the flexibility of it, and that's what we want to achieve. Simply with that, because business conditions, operating conditions changes every day. Nothing is going to stop.
Okay, so it's a goal, it's not an achievement at this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. And you say sometimes about the performance, like 99% or something like this. Did you manage to get 100%?
Right. So theoretically, it can achieve 100%, but practically, it's impossible. Maximum is 99.999% simply because there's always a certain factor that we simply humans cannot detect out. But how do we hedge this error now? It's simply we hedge it with human beings to detect the error and to correct the error. And hence, we create a new positions of AI models controller with the client to actually create the error. So say, for example, when we scan a legal documents, and then, when it passed through the stage, some models that has less probability, because it's all work on probabilities, that has slightly less probability, it will be flagged out. And flag out with, this is a very lower medium line, this is a very high possible mistakes, then let the human legal guys to actually judge whether is this right or wrong. If it's right, pass it through. If it's wrong, modify a bit, modify a lot, and then we pass it through. So that's how we hedge the risk at this moment to provide the client 100% accuracy.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I shouldn't say 100%. In practical term, in technical term, it's still 99.9%. It's never be 100%.
I was talking about the cases where you can achieve 100%, like, I don't know, counting people, but I cannot achieve 100% in something like it's more emotional, like how I may educate my children, using a severe mode or using a more flexible mode. Here is this is not, you cannot have 100%.
Yeah, at the moment, I don't think, there are several models out there in the lab already trying to analyze humans' emotion expression. But at the moment, it's mostly about actions detections only. So you can't really, I didn't install it on this phone, but I have an application chatbot that we try in our lab to detect about 3 emotional changes on our face. Although in the real lab, it already goes up to about 36 expressions of emotional changes. But all these things are currently in the lab only. In a practical model that we have seen all these AI models on the lab, on the web, it's still very difficult to actually sense the person is happy, sad, angry, and so on yet, because there's not too many data set to actually support the hypothesis at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm not sure if this is the case, but maybe for the past few decades when AI research started, if all the AI systems that we built somehow resemble the way animals evolved, do you think maybe if that is true, we can take the evolutionary theory from biology and apply it to AI systems in order to predict how they will look like maybe 50 years from now or a century from now?
This is a hypothesis that I would say yes, probably. It's just simply because I can't stop everybody out there, other AI researchers who are doing some crazy things. For example, applying AI on weapons and so on, where there are people who apply models on biogenetics, try to influence the genetic combinations. So my answer is yes, probably, but it's a hypothesis. Of course, actions are being taken on several initiatives by the World Economic Forums, where I'm part of it, to actually try to warn those AI researchers, trying to warn general public, trying to set a standard for all these models creation. But unfortunately, we live in a world of total biases. Let me put it this way. Let me tell you my own hypothesis. Whether or not we are going to create a new beings, that I'm not too sure yet. But whether AI models will replace human beings, I don't think so. Simply because when we create the models, we put our own biases into the models creation, everybody. And in the history of human beings, everybody has differences. Races, language, even down to siblings, father and son, daughter and mom, differences. Everybody has biases when they create the models. And that's why you are talking about, we're creating AI models to create AI models. That is the biggest topic in MIT lab now. So hence, the models we created are all very biased towards each other, and hence it will never be united, simply because human beings would not be united. It's not united. AI models created resembles how we think, how we do things, and we're just trying to replicate. For example, the Boston Robotics is simply trying to recreate the steps of jumping or opening the doors. But do we really understand how we think? Can we actually draw a map of how we think? We don't. We don't even have an example. How are we going to create something that we think we know? So that is just my own hypothesis. I'm not going to go into the topic of this that much because it will never end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, hi. You mentioned previously that one of the steps you take to hedge against errors in models is to provide the capability for your clients to basically flag as incorrect some assumptions you took. Mm-hmm. What is your experience with that process? Do your clients tend to flag many false positives? Do they abuse this power, override the models too much? As I read in other instances, this was a real problem. So basically, unaided models tended to perform marginally better than aided models.
It's actually about the same as the previous question as well. The risk is there. I cannot influence others, but I'm trying to do what I can by putting more effort into the business side now, trying to show the real capability of AI rather than going into these topics. But nonetheless, there are people who do bad things, who use the models to do bad things. And to be honest, I don't know how to stop them at this moment. I've seen a lot of crazy models on the net. Yesterday, Peter showed me some really, really outrageous models creation or correlations. It's just no meaning, but there are people who are doing that, and the way to stop it? No way to stop it. It's like no way to stop people from telling lies or stopping stealing things, bad things. But what we can do is trying to be more optimistic, trying to be more active in governing the ecosystem by telling the good things, by coming onto stage to tell the good things, to try to guide people to do the right thing, because our reasoning is very simple. Instead of wasting time on creating those nonsense models, why don't focus your time in solving some real life problem, today's problem, and make money and make a good living out of it, and also creating the efficiencies of the society. And that is a single easy motive of me standing here today. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hello. I have a question regarding the data modules. Are they modular data modules, or each data module is standalone module?
You mean in the AIX model?
Yes.
To be honest, we are still debating a lot about this. We haven't had a real answer yet to this and that's why we need to open source part of it to create the debates. The idea at the moment, or at least my personal idea with my team, is it's going to be mixed, because when it depends on let me put it into context. Let's say accounting data and recruitment data are totally different. So but they are stored in the same storage. So they are, on one hand, a singular modular, but on the other hand, it's actually a different modular for different purposes. So it's a debate that we don't really spend too much time on debating it, but it is a problem that we're trying to solve. Indirectly not answering your questions yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I have also a question, because here I am.
Sorry, oh, okay, over there.
You mentioned that AI is learning from us, from each other. I think a really good example how AI is learning is Microsoft.
Sorry, can you repeat the questions? I lost the voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think a really good example is how AI learns from each other is Microsoft Tay. I think Microsoft had to switch off the chat boot after, I think, less than 24 hours. That was only a chat boot. But if you think about that, autonomous driving cars are learning from each other. My question is, maybe a theoretical question is, who is responsible if AI programs make something wrong? Because if I do a failure, I have to go in the front of court. I have to go maybe how bad it is to prison. How if AI makes something wrong? How we deal with it?
That falls into the same problem with all the, let's say, the frontier technology. Peter may probably give me more help later, and Richard as well. But let me hitch it with another question. Right now, I mean, you just read another blockchain scam last night. The Germany, I forgot the name, that he fled away with 50 million ICO dollars with 2 pictures on Twitter where he's leaving to Scandinavian country somewhere with a beer on his hand. No, there is no governing at this stage yet. However, there are a lot of efforts, especially the governments. You know the US government, Chinese government, UK governments, even the EU are setting up a lot of initiatives trying to solve it, although they are going to be slow, just like any regulations, just like any politicians. They are going to be slow, and they're not going to keep up with the latest trends or latest problem. But that is the very least that the regulators can do. And second way is the role of the public, the role of the medias, to try to condemn all these actions, all this behavior in the fastest way possible, and try to reduce the fake news that affecting the industry, the growth of the industry. Simply to put it in hand, no one can stop the growth of any technology, and this is not just restricting to AI. No one can stop. I cannot stop from any of you to just create a model on TensorFlow. This is so easy. No one can stop. Hence, the optimistic way of looking forward is try to make it better rather than try to diminish it. Does that satisfy your question?
Partially, thank you.
Partially, yes.
Hello, I have two quick questions. One would be, given the volume of data that goes through your systems, how do you measure false positives and recall?
Sorry,
case?
How
do you measure false positives in production? That would be the first one. And the second one, given that the models are so small to fit your devices,
yeah.
For debugging purposes in production,
yeah.
how can you tell why a model made a classification decision?
All right.
Because you might need this information in various cases.
So some of the applications still requires data. I do agree. Not all AI creation can work on limited data. The number of data, well, sorry, I should put it this way. When those applications that requires more data to solve the problem, 99% of the time, the data are already there. You can't create new data to solve it. So let's say the error detections in machine learning model, in the production system, is the data are usually have already been collected. You already know which are the defects, which are the non-defects. It's already very clear. You will need more data to train the predictions of the defects. So this is one example. Second example is theft detection in retail. We don't have that much data because previously we were not detecting the theft actions by camera. That means it's not being quantified. We only use the eyes to detect, yes, you steal something, and hence I need to catch you. But those data are not being turned into digital and quantified. Hence, you cannot build the model based on it. So what the predictive model is trying to do is simply, let's say, to try to predict the actions of stealing. What are the probability of taking a goods, opening your blouse or your bags to put it into it? Are these classified as percentage? So how to put the probability of those actions? Is this 100% being seen as a theft action? Is this 90% possibilities? Is this 50% possibilities? And these are the problems that we are facing right now. And when we use our own assumption, that is the bias already. So that is a problem that the industry is still trying to solve, or let's say every AI company is trying to solve, and hence cannot really solve the problem in a perfection way yet. However, if you think of the applications of trying to use AI to create AI models is, we are trying to generate or collect external data to try to predict on unbiased model creation. So in the theft case, we can actually detect, let's say, detect all the other theft actions, not only in this situation, but every other situation that we can collect, and try to use that to determine what the percentage of a theft action is. Although it's still biased, but the bias is being reduced to the minimum that we can try to achieve the accuracies that we can. I'm not sure whether do I answer your questions correctly.
It touches briefly. Yeah. And for the second part, on the theft example, would your models be able to tell why some action was classified as a theft? Because maybe as part of the investigation, you might want to know why the police was alerted and what was happening there, and how the model, especially if they're models created by another AI, how they made this sort of reasoning.
Well, the answer is no, simply because if the model is created by another AI, it simply resembles all the external information to determine whether is this a yes or a no. So this is a trap in AI model creations. And when we have, again, it's a big debate. When we have AI to create AI, then we want to have AI to create AI to create AI, and it's a non-stop. It's simply, let's put it this way, you just try to imagine everything as probability, and hence probability increases when you multiply the probability together. But sometimes it does decrease the probability as well. So that is a non-direct answer to you, but the answer is no. You can't really tell whether is this a totally unbiased actions or not. And if you reach to that point, you just have to use your human sense to say, is this correct? Is this wrong?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm still on this AIX subject.
Yeah.
So suppose I have a large chain of retail shops and I'm selling electronics or something.
Yeah.
And I come to you and say, Daniel, please help me build an AI solution that would grow my business.
Yeah.
How do you approach this problem?
Well, simple. I will reach out to, although we have our own capability, but let's put it a scalable model. I'll reach out to AI startups that do the best in image recognition, and then install the AIX platform into your premise or into your system, and then let them run the models onto it to try to resemble that production. That is a very simple way of applying it. So, although the actual action is much more complicated, but that should be expertise, the domain expertise and the technical expertise to work together.
So you install the platform on my premises, and then I can choose. So I want the shoplifting detection. I want the crowd, the undecided customer behavior detection.
Yeah, that is the UI UX that we dream of achieving finally. But the first version is going to be no UI interaction yet. We are trying to put it into a very minimum UI or UI interactions, because right now it's still very difficult to predict all the possibilities in the whole production. We can only have a very, very clear objective of this is a theft detection, hence the only UI you need that create the output of the AIX is a screen that detects the theft or falling actions and create the signals or sirens, to put it that way. And that is the only UX that we want the operators to experience. At this stage, it's very limited, I have to be honest.
Okay, and do you think of something like I could buy a certain component, for example, shoplifting behavior detection from a third party and would connect to your AIX? I would use that as a plugin in your AIX?
Answer is yes, and that's the reason of this AIX. Answer is we're trying to accommodate any third-party AI apps to actually be able to run it on us, and that's why we need to partially outsource, especially at least we need to open source our API to try to integrate it. That is the first motive. But at least, you know, let me explain again about the objective of AIX. It's simply we see there's a big gap between what the startup can do on AI and what the actual trial or POC can be done on actual businesses. Right now, almost every single startups have enjoyed the POC stage, the proof of concept between for testing it for specific models. But I haven't seen a real permanent applications to run it continuously in the models yet. So that is just the evolving of the industry and the technologies moving forward. And we are trying to do something to solve this along the way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think we're pretty much running out of time for the questions.
Okay, yeah.
Really great questions, and I know Danny and I were talking last night along with the other speakers, and being the first time they were curious about the community, the development community inclusion. I think you said that usually the questions are an indicator of the quality of that community, and I think what's your rating of our community based on the questions so far?
Very good. I love the questions. I especially love the first questions. It's no exception.
Okay, thank you a lot, Danny. I think he really deserves a big round of applause.
Thank you.
And before letting you go down from the stage, I think we need to also thank our supporting partners. We have Betfair as our technology partner. We have Fortech, Gemini Solution, Subsign as main partners, and then Cluj IT, Big Data Science, IT Days, and Morphosa as our supporting organizations. Danny, don't go just yet. Okay, I have one more thing for you. Our main technology partner, Betfair, is having this, let's say, competition, if you want, or activation. You received this card when you picked up your tags, and the whole idea is to write a small story to yourself, how you see yourself from the technology perspective in 5 years. And once you go to their spot, you're going to get some prizes, and you're going to have some fun. And the reason I wanted you to be on stage is if you will write something to yourself on that card for five years from now, what would you say? What will you expect to be from AI and IoT perspective in 5 years?
Oh, well, 5 years from now, it's very simple. You're going to look at AI as just another mobile apps in the next 5 years, as if like you are developing another native application. This is the natural evolving of technology. So it's just going to be easily embedded into everybody's life. Everybody will know how to create a model. The model is going to be more precise. The model is going to be more applicable, much more, applicable to industries, applicable to daily usage, and so on. So.
Thank you very much again. So, guys, we're going to have 30 minutes of break. We're going to resume with the next session at exactly at 12. Enjoy your coffee break, enjoy the coffee, and see you a bit later.